For this week's study, I'm going to cover a topic that I have experienced with firsthand, and that is labor outsourcing. I spent the entirety of my career as a contract IT employee shuffling from job to job with little stability, varying pay, and no foreseeable inkling where I'm going to end up next. Although I've got to work at some very interesting places and met a lot of cool people, career-wise, I don't think it's the greatest way to go about things. I will discuss both the benefits and drawbacks of labor outsourcing for both the employer and employee standpoints. Outsourcing occurs when firms use subcontractors to carry out specific tasks rather than hiring internal employees to do the work. In recent years, companies have outsourced these tasks to subcontractors based in developing nations, primarily due to lower labor costs, in a process known as offshoring. While much of the offshoring for American companies started with low-skill manufacturing jobs, the advent of advanced technologies led many firms to outsource their computer programming and customer support jobs as well. Because of the high population and low cost, India is an ideal and often used nation for outsourcing, much to the chagrin of a lot of American customers, particularly State Street Bank. The primary benefit that companies gain when they outsource is a reduction in labor costs. When companies hire internal employees, they must include a competitive compensation and benefits package to recruit and keep workers. When companies outsource their labor, they pay a much lower rate and often do not include benefits such as health insurance and vacation pay. Outsourcing also reduces the workload for human resources processes, such as hiring documentation and payroll taxes. The benefits for the employers also doubles as the drawbacks for the employees. As someone who knows firsthand, I've been given cut rate insurance, no paid days off, and an hourly rate that is, although livable, not as much as what I believe I deserve, and have had to argue and haggle with agencies offering me advanced opportunities for slightly more than entry-level pay. Although there aren't a whole lot of great benefits for outsourced employees, from my own experience, I've noticed that I tend to get hired faster for contract jobs, and don't have nearly as rigorous of an interview process. Also, contract jobs tend to not require a lot of skill, and if you're an entry-level employee looking just to make pocket money, they're almost never in short supply. I will say again that my experience as a contractor has brought me to some great places and met great people and friends along the way. I was lucky enough to work at big-name firms like Pfizer, BU, Tufts Health Plan, and MIT. However, I don't think it's a good way to go about a career, and I feel that the end doesn't justify the means. I happen to be lucky in my contract career so far, but a lot of my fellow contractors have been shuffled from horrible gig to horrible gig, making few friends and only being miserable. One of the main drawbacks of labor outsourcing occurs when the primary contractor attempts to communicate with the outsourced labor force. Depending on the location of the outsourced labor and any potential language barriers, the lag time in communications between the employer and the outsourced workers can impede any changes that the company must make to improve its processes. Since the company has less control over the outsourced labor force, leaders are at least one step removed from implementing any new plans. This can also affect the employee as it has for me. With internal HR removed from the equation, the contract employee has to report to their agency, who can tend to be removed, unavailable, or not as efficient as the HR department of the company you're assigned to. It can leave you feeling lost and with little representation for your rights and needs in the workplace. Also, with recruiters handling your HR issues who are not HR professionals and usually glorified telemarketers, whatever representation you may have tends to be mediocre at best. In years past, a common sight on manufactured goods was a stencil of the words "Made in China." As recently as 2005, labor costs in China were 25 to 30% of those in the US. However, a recent study shows that the outsourcing of manufacturing jobs to China may be on the decline as labor costs start to rise. The study by Alex Partners estimates that the cost of outsourcing manufacturing labor to China will catch up to the labor costs in the US by 2015. As the labor cost gap closes between developed and developing nations, companies are still looking for ways to outsource labor and reduce costs. The process of onshoring allows companies to outsource their labor to alleviate their overhead costs while introducing new jobs to the domestic labor market. A major example of onshoring comes in the information technology labor market, where companies rely on being able to communicate with professionals who specialize in website development, database architecture, and legacy systems to maintain their computer networks. India and China provide a large pool of expert, proficient IT workers at a low cost. Furthermore, if a company has already moved its factory overseas, to take advantage of low labor costs, it will want its technology workers near its manufacturing plant. Often a company must locate manufacturing and technology jobs overseas if it wants access to the domestic market. The governments of China and India often require this type of technology outsourcing for a company to get an inside track to sell its products to that country's market. Another advantage of India's IT workers is that they already speak English. IT managers in China only make about $22,600, while those in India make about $30,800 a year. That's because the cost of living is cheaper in these countries. However, a U.S. technology company must keep its costs low to compete in the global marketplace. If it can get trained workers at a lower price, it makes for good business to do so. 3 ways to reduce IT outsourcing. First, federal funds should be used to address the supply side of the problem. Grants, loans, and subsidies will bring more U.S. college students graduating in STEM areas. Educating the American workforce will help decrease reliance on important new workers. However, this will only go so far, as U.S. workers still need higher wages than Indian or Chinese workers. Second, reduce the number of H-1 visas. Again, this is just a temporary solution. U.S. companies can save as much as 10% by technology outsourcing, whether the worker is in the U.S. or overseas. Reducing technology outsourcing through reducing the visa or even enacting laws prohibiting outsourcing will only raise costs and reduce competitiveness for U.S.-based companies. Third, do as the emerging market countries do. Require foreign companies to hire U.S. workers before they sell to the U.S. market. The downside of that is higher prices for these imported goods. That's exactly what's happened to the Japanese cars that used to be much cheaper before they opened U.S. manufacturing plants. For small and medium businesses, these principles can be distilled into 4 operating dictums. Follow high talent, not low cost. Saving 50% on manufacturing costs is great, but hiring talent that can improve sales by 50% is better. Seek the talent that can help the business grow. Your top software engineer had been hired by Google for double what you can afford? How about outsourcing some programming work to Eastern Europe so you can finish the software release on time and not miss the holiday season? Think about the rest of the world not as a cheap alternative to manufacturing, but as a hungry market. Old thinking, let's use low-paid radiologists in India to do remote X-ray analysis of rich patients in the U.S. New thinking, let's use retired teachers in the U.S. to teach English to a booming middle class in China and Brazil over video conference. Use technology in order to optimize talent and cost. The potent combination of collaboration technologies, cloud computing, and 3D printing, for example, allows small and medium businesses to create a product blueprint stateside, to outsource localization to various countries, and to optimize manufacturing into multiple locales. Just like Intel splits its research and development, fabrication, and sales between Ireland, Israel, India, China, and Silicon Valley. Now small businesses can do the same. Think globally, but act locally. Remember that employing local talent and selling to global markets requires adaptation and localization. A good case in point is the process many companies call tropicalization, when getting ready to operate in Latin America. This consists of a combination of translating the product and packaging into Spanish and Portuguese, adaptation of pricing, and considerations for taxes and local trade agreements. Some points to take away from this. A principle of Taoism states everything in life will eventually shift to its opposite. Since outsourcing has been such a big deal because of its affordability, its cost is starting to go up, making it cheaper for employers to hire internally again. This could be a good thing in the coming years, but it will only be a matter of time before it shifts back in the other direction, potentially repeating this pattern indefinitely. Furthermore, if outsourcing must be implemented, it should be implemented more wisely, using the suggestions from the previous slide. I will also note that contract agencies need to stop taking advantage of desperate employees, treating them like disposable robots who exist to fill space and give recruiters their commission. This is more of an environmental problem as well, because I've noticed those recruiters tend to be just as desperate and transient themselves, and are just trying to keep a job just as badly as we are. I think the problem could potentially be resolved with better resources from the contract agency. Only one agency I worked for provided study materials and training courses free of charge to help advance your skills as long as you were employed by them. I think this is a practice that should be implemented by other agencies wherever possible to help their contractors break the cycle of infinite contract employment and finally land that permanent role. Also, I think more funding should go to better employee benefits. Every agency I've worked for had benefits of varying degrees, and I think something better than cut-rate insurance should be provided rather than lining the pockets of their executives. Also, contractors need better employee representation since they have no official HR department to go to. I think having a glorified salesman fresh out of college as your only source of representation on the job would be ridiculous. Perhaps better HR training or people with actual HR experience to be working as or with recruiters would be a better solution.